It was a pretty big day for Oregon politics, courtesy of a move, frankly, everyone saw coming.
I've decided I am going to run for governor of Oregon.
Former New York Times columnist Nicholas Kristof has officially entered the race, which we should point out is really, really crowded. Seriously, there are dozens of candidates. Also,
you are terror! I will not sit down, I won't comply!
We need to talk about what happened at the Portland Public School Board meeting last night. But first,
are we really wanting to allow people to live that way?
Portland's housing crisis and your viewer emails.
No one deserves to be living in that type of condition.
Lead us to Marine Drive.
We're humans, and we don't appreciate being talked to like we're trash.
Here's the story.
Let's get right into it tonight, frankly. These are the photos sent to us by viewers of the story. Actually, several of you have written in before asking us to look at the homeless camping situation along Marine Drive. If you've been there, you probably know why. But actually, this email from Tina put it over the top. She wrote, "Can I ask why we are so focused on the Laurelhurst camps," meaning Laurelhurst Park in Southeast Portland, "and not the ones on Marine Drive or East Portland? I have filed and filed complaints about the camp down the street here in East County, and nothing has happened. I'm concerned," she added, "about how equitable the reporting is on the camps and where it's getting attention." Tina, great point. We really appreciate it. And tonight we are following suit and taking a look at just how jarring our housing crisis is along Northeast Portland's Marine Drive, because again, that's how this show works. So if you have any thoughts on anything that you see tonight, email thestory@kgw.com. Use the hashtag #TheStoryKGW. Your feedback, as you're seeing, truly does drive this show. Now, really quick, I do want to warn you, some of the details of this first piece might be a little graphic. That being said, here is tonight's big story.
This is video I shot on my cell phone of Marine Drive in Northeast Portland. If you've driven here lately or ridden your bike, you know the area is jarring. Same goes for nearby 33rd. So our team at The Story kept it simple. Tuesday morning, we met Jim Carr and Mark Blanchard, two viewers who had written in with specific concerns.
Is my car in your way, Steve?
Not at all.
No, okay.
We'll start with Carr. He wanted to meet at Well 15 near Northeast 185th.
Again, clearly a city well.
A city well and part of Portland's drinking water infrastructure.
It's one of many along the Marine Drive area here.
Carr is a retired Portland Parks employee with a background in horticulture. His fear? What's growing around the well, just outside that chain link fence. A large homeless camp with cars and RVs sitting in inches of mud.
You have vehicles that are being stripped down. You have the antifreeze, all the fluids from the vehicles, all of that is now migrating down into the watershed.
In other words, Carr worries those fluids and perhaps even human waste could eventually make their way into Portland's drinking water.
For us to just look the other way and say that, yeah, okay, that's okay, it's only for a while. But is it really only for a while?
A rep for the city assured KGW the drinking water is safe, adding the aquifers that feed this well are solid and nearly 200 feet below ground. Carr thinks officials should take this more seriously.
Which way are you going to head, Mark?
With that, Mark Blanchard showed up. Viewer number 2. Blanchard suggested we follow him on his bike to the spot that strikes him most. So we headed west toward I-205. This is what that area looks like. Cars, tents, a burned out RV wrapped in plastic.
Why did you... There's a car coming in behind you, by the way.
We started to interview Blanchard when this happened.
I was born and raised here, so I've ridden this multiple times, and I kept seeing it getting more and more extreme.
Blanchard wanted to meet here for 2 reasons. First, safety.
I've had it where I've been on the path and actually had a car coming at me on the bike path.
The second reason, Blanchard said, Portland's struggle with rising crime and an overwhelmed police bureau seems undeniable here. Recently, someone stole his sister-in-law's car. She found it, he says, in this camp. It was stripped and totaled.
It wasn't the police that were able to get that. It was like a good Samaritan finding it out here.
Tuesday, both men were adamant they don't blame the chaos along Marine Drive on the people living here. Most, they believe, are struggling. One man near I-205 told me off camera he's shocked by how rampant the crime is down here. He also said he's a prophet and built Portland with his mind. Back at Well 15, another man camping here told me he works and can afford an apartment, but he has a record, possession of a stolen car. So no landlords, he says, will rent to him.
We're not happy when people just dump stolen cars here in the first place.
Derek was the only person comfortable talking to us. He says people live out here along the river in the elements because it's a community. They feel safe with each other, and they know people don't want them near homes and businesses.
We're humans, and we don't appreciate being talked to like we're trash. So we're just trying to survive just like everybody else. We're just having a little harder time.
So as you can imagine, I had a lot of questions for city and local leaders after being out on Marine Drive yesterday. First up, let's talk about the drinking water issue. That has to be jarring to hear. So Commissioner Mingus Mapps is in charge of Portland's Water Bureau, and he sent us a long email. His staff definitely wanted to talk about this. It said in part, Portlanders can rest assured that their water is safe to drink. We are not currently operating the Columbia South Shore well field, but it stands ready in case winter storms stir up any issues in the Bull Run. Then he added, that said, we protect our wells from whatever may happen above ground through a variety of methods. The aquifers where we get the water are deep. Well 15, for example, is 195 feet below ground. The wells are built from solid material to keep out contaminants. That being said, specific to clearing any of those camps at all, because we get questions about it all the time from those of you who drive or bike there, that answer was a little less clear. We got long-winded emails from both the city and the Port of Portland, who both have land out there, and both said that clearing these camps legally is really messy because, again, multiple agencies own land along Marine Drive, including the city, ODOT, the Port of Portland, plus you have private owners. But to sum up how tough this is, I sent them these photos that we showed you at the top of the show. They were actually from Mark Blanchard, the cyclist who you met in the story. And the city said, hey, you know, the land in those photos, that looks like the Port of Portland's land. That's not our land. The Port of Portland said, hey, the land in those photos, that looks like the city's land. That's not our land. Neither mentioned any plans to clear camps or had time at this point for interviews. All right, let's talk about politics now. You might have seen a couple of push alerts today, a couple of tweets, a couple of headlines. Former New York Times columnist, to sum up, Kristof announced today he is running for Oregon governor as a Democrat. Our own Laurel Porter, as you can see, interviewed Kristof ahead of this big announcement, exclusive interview. Laurel, well done. And so we want to bring you in now because I want to focus on two common criticisms that you asked him about and that he's gotten leading up to this announcement because this has been bubbling up for a while. The first one is about his experience.
And I think he's been waiting for this question as well because he has no political experience. He has no executive leadership experience. He's worked as a journalist for nearly 40 years at the Times, but he thinks that plays to his strength and it may be his pathway to being elected.
So you're right that, look, I have not been a politician. I am not a politician. I haven't been a lobbyist. If somebody wants a lobbyist or a politician to keep on the track that we're now on, there are plenty of choices there. What I do offer is a lifetime spent in the trenches with people who've been elbowed aside by their government, doing my utmost to help them address their problems, no matter who stands in the way. And I think that right now is what Oregon needs. It's who I am. It's what I do.
Kristof has really been motivated to run by people he knows in Yamhill County and other places who've fallen on hard times. He wrote about them in his book, Tightrope. A quarter of the kids on his Yamhill school bus when he was in grade school have died since from alcohol or drug abuse or suicide. And he blames that in part on a lack of affordable housing, an Oregon education system that comes up short, and a lack of good jobs. All things he says he wants to try to fix.
Really interesting, and that's tragic to hear about the revelation that we knew was in his book. The other criticism that could very well, and I know he knows, be a distraction during his candidacy is the issue of residency. And for those who don't know, according to the state's constitution, a candidate for governor has to have lived in the state for 3 years before the election. So what did he say about that?
Well, right, he did. He voted in New York in November of 2020, raising questions. But his legal team says he could have legally been considered a resident of both New York and Oregon. And Kristof thinks he's on solid ground there. Here's what he told me when I asked. Some may wonder if Oregon's home, why didn't you vote in Oregon in 2020?
I could have voted in Oregon. I could have voted in New York. If I'd been a more calculating Politico, I would have. But at the end of the day, I could have done so in either place. And I think that's a distraction from these real crises that are afflicting people around the state.
And some of your opponents may take this and challenge it in court. I mean, how much of a distraction will it be when you want to talk about some of these other issues?
I'll have to leave it to them to decide. I mean, I think they'd probably rather talk about that than talk about the fact that we have fourth worst homelessness in the country, the second worst unhoused population in the country. And so other folks may well raise it, but I am an Oregonian, period.
You can see we talked in the old barn there on the property
setting.
Because it was raining. But if you want to see the entire interview, it's about 25 minutes. It's on the KGW YouTube channel right now and also on this story on KGW.com.
All right, Laurel, fascinating interview. Again, exclusive. Well done. That's really interesting.
Thank you, Maggie.
We'll see how it goes. And as we said, the governor's race is already really crowded. By our count, more than 24 candidates have announced that they are running for governor of Oregon. So let's talk about some of the more notable ones. By the way, it was tough to get all those photos on the screen. On the Democratic side, we have House Speaker Tina Kotek and State Treasurer Tobias Reed. Both have a lot of experience in state government. Kotek has been a state rep since 2007, and Reed was also elected to the state house that year and then was elected treasurer in 2017. On the Republican side, you might remember the name Bud Pierce. He ran against Kate Brown in the 2016 governor's race. 2 Republican mayors also running: Stan Pulliam from Sandy and Carrie McQuiston from Baker City. Now here's the wild card. Democratic State Senator Betsy Johnson has announced she is running for governor as an independent. She's been in the legislature since 2001 and has a history of being a moderate and voting with Republicans on some issues. So the big question is, who is the clear front runner here? Well, I asked that question to KGW political analyst and political science professor Jim Moore. He's with Pacific University, and he told me at this point, there is no front runner.
Right now, in terms of credible candidates, it looks like we're probably going to have 4 or 5 Republicans and 4 or 5 Democrats credible coming in, because there is nobody who's anointed as the successor. There's nobody people have been talking about as, oh, that person will be the next governor, kind of in line of succession. So it's wide open, and seeing this many candidates is not a surprise. So we have statewide officers running. So Tobias Reed, the treasurer. We have the Speaker of the House, Tina Kotek, Ellen Mosenblum, the Attorney General, might get in. And yet, people don't really know who those people are. Unless you're paying attention to politics, nobody could name who the treasurer is. So that is not going for them either. So that's why it's really wide open. Same thing on the Republican side. Even though Bud Pierce has run for governor before, people can't really name Bud Pierce. And so everybody starts from the same level. And it's how strong is your message? How much money do you have to get it out? How successful are you?
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Interesting. By the way, in case the dates are a little muddled, the primary election is on May 17th, which is a little more than 6 months away. The top candidates from each party will advance to the general, which will be on November 8th, 2022. More than a year away, but you'll start seeing those ads soon. All right, Portland Public Schools is considering a COVID vaccine mandate for students. So naturally, a bunch of people without masks showed up to protest the school board meeting. And this happened.
All right, we're going to suspend the meeting and we'll move to a virtual location.
Yeah, it was a bit of a mess. We'll get into it when the story continues. Welcome back, guys. Keep sending in those questions and those comments to thestory@kgw.com. Use the hashtag. It's right here. TheStoryKGW on Twitter. We're always checking your messages during the show. And if you watched the show earlier this week, and a lot of people had thoughts on this, we ran a story about how school board meetings across the country are getting heated and aggressive and sometimes even violent. School board meetings. Now, for the record, school board members are meant to be nonpartisan, and they're not paid for these jobs. In fact, in the past, their elections have had low voter turnouts, while their meetings are usually, and don't take this the wrong way, a little sleepy, a little boring. But all that has changed in the last few months. It's gotten so bad that across the country, the National School Boards Association called certain outbursts at school board meetings domestic terrorism. Their words. They later apologized and kind of walked that back. But just last night, sort of to the surprise of no one, if you were following the news leading up to this, this is what happened at a Portland Public School Board meeting held to discuss mandating vaccines for students.
You're cowards! No, you are cowards! I will not sit down. I won't comply. You guys are cowards!
See, super boring, super calm. A group of people showed up to protest at last night's meeting and in a crowded indoor setting decided to whip off their masks. And I do want to stop and make sure you know this. This was not your usual school board crowd of concerned parents from the district. This was an organized effort by anti-vaccine activists across the Northwest. They, in fact, put out a call for people to show up and disrupt the meeting, and it looks like it worked. Individuals from a group called People's Rights Oregon showed up. That is a group founded by Ammon Bundy of the anti-government Malheur takeover fame, along with right-wing groups like Free Oregon, who has been backing conservative school board candidates and challenging vaccine mandates. Margot Logan, also an anti-mask, anti-vaccine conspiracy theorist who ran a failed campaign for the school board, was there. She was stopped at the door without a mask. You just saw that. Also, leaders and supporters of Oregon Moms Union. They're a conservative group dedicated to taking on school board meetings across the state.
It's all about choice. We want freedom of choice, and we want the opportunity to speak. So they allowed 25 minutes for comment. That means about 3 minutes each, and it was filled immediately, and you're not actually getting a good variety of voices. So there's a lot of parents that reached out to me and my organization saying, hey, we want to be able to say something. We want to get our voices heard too. What do we do? And so I said, let's show up and we will record your comments here so that they can be on the record. So it's not just what is showing up in the school board meetings, because there has been a kind of an epidemic with school board meetings where people are being blocked out from them. They're all held on Zoom. Parents are not feeling like their voices are being heard.
To be clear, you heard her say people were allowed to speak last night. The school board shut it down because they didn't want to speak while wearing masks, violating the mask mandate. Now, there were people in the crowd who also don't have kids in PPS. You probably gathered that from the earlier description. In fact, a lot of them don't even live in Portland. Kind of reminds us of that scene from Mean Girls. She doesn't even go here. Wish I could yell that, but I can't. They brought signs. They got into shouting matches with other people at the meeting, and they actually lectured and, some report, shouted at teenagers, students, who were there to speak up in favor of a vaccine mandate, to give their take on what should happen in their schools. And because so many people refused to put on a mask, here's what happened.
All right, we're going to suspend the meeting and we'll move to a virtual location. We can't put everyone at risk. Thank you.
So the board decided to suspend the in-person meeting and move it online. But did the protesters go home? No, come on. Of course they didn't. It's 2021. Why would they? They stayed and they held their own meeting in the building. So that happened. PPS responded to it today saying, quote, "We are deeply disappointed that some attendees blatantly disregarded the statewide face covering requirement. While we welcome a diversity of perspectives to be expressed in a public setting, Chair DePass made the right call in moving the discussion to a virtual setting, given the unwillingness of certain members of the audience to observe required public health requirements." PPS also said that someone on their staff faced racist hate speech during the chaos, and they're also addressing that. So now let's talk a little bit more about the actual meeting, which I'll point out what went on past 10 o'clock last night. The board actually talked about a potential vaccine mandate for students, and PPS is the largest district in the state of Oregon. So if they pass one, it'll have big implications for other districts. Herman Green is a new member of the school board this year. And he says he is against a vaccine mandate because he says he's heard from families of color who just are not comfortable with it.
I guess I'm at odds with this because I'm not comfortable telling anyone that they have to. You have to get your kids vaccinated if you want them to be educated by us, especially when we're talking about the younger kids, the 12-year-olds. I'm hearing from a wide variety, Black, white, Latino. I'm hearing from a wide variety of families, and all of them are saying the same things, or at least in my social network, that they're not comfortable being forced to put this vaccine, into their kids.
Now, one other board member, Gary Hollins, said he was against a vaccine mandate, but most of the board said they are for it, saying other vaccines are already required in schools. The board also heard from students who say they want a vaccine mandate to keep themselves safe while they're at school. The board is scheduled to vote on a mandate on November 16th. All right, moving on here tonight. You have been so generous with our Hey Help campaign, so let's keep it going. We're going to tell you tonight about a local group working to end childhood hunger. That's coming up when the story continues. Thank you so much to everyone sending in their questions and their comments to the story at kgw.com. You can also find us on Instagram at the story KGW. Now, I do want to take some time to talk about this week's Hey Help campaign. We are asking you this week to consider donating to Urban Gleaners. They distribute thousands of pounds of free food directly to kids and their families year-round, and they also deliver food to local schools. To donate, just hold up your phone's camera to this QR code. It'll take you to a donation page. You can also go to kgw.com/heyhelp. And while you're doing that, let's hear from Urban Gleaners founder and executive director Tracy Ossaran.
Urban Gleaners is a food rescue organization. We collect edible surplus food that would otherwise go to waste, and we get it to kids and families who need it, as we like to say, pure and simple. So we collect food from all over the city. That there's a lot of surplus food in this country. 40% of the food produced in the United States gets thrown away. And a lot of that food gets thrown in landfills where it creates huge amounts of methane, which is very harmful to greenhouse gas. So we step in, we collect all this food, we sort it, we look through it, we make sure it's all edible and safe for humans, and we then deliver it to kids and families in the neighborhoods where they live. The schools that we work with are generally between 90% and 100% of the kids at these schools qualify for free and reduced lunch. And when I started Urban Gleaners, I didn't know that this was such an issue. I didn't know that so many kids were going without food. And this came to light a couple of years in. And principals would tell me that these kids often got nothing to eat at night. There's plenty of food in this country to feed everyone. This should not be happening.
Yeah, we agree. This should not be happening. There's that QR code again. This is a micro donation drive, so feel free to give any amount, no matter how small. And by the way, Urban Gleaners also takes food donations at their warehouse in Southeast Portland. Again, kgw.com/heyhelp for information on that. Keep sending in those questions and those comments. Again, the story at kgw.com. We're going to finish the show right after this. Great show tonight. Great feedback from you guys. So keep sending in those questions and comments to thestory@kgw.com or find us on social media with the hashtag #TheStoryKGW. Time now to bring in Laurel Porter for the news at 6:30. Hey, Laurel.
Hi again, Maggie. We're looking into Portland gun violence and homicide from months ago, and now the FBI is offering a big reward. The news at 6:30 starts now.